On February 13th, 1968, the world as we knew it changed forever. In the jungles of Vietnam, the dead started coming back to life, and pretty soon they took over the entire planet. The President of the United States is dead, and the Vietnam War is officially over. But not everyone got that memo. No, a new player has entered the game. Meet Jungle Jim, a lone warrior who turns carnage into performance art. He's not just good at killing, he's theatrical about it. But there's something darker going on beneath the bravado. He keeps talking to someone that only he can hear, a phantom voice guiding him through the blood-soaked madness. His grip on reality is slipping, and no one knows what this madman will do next, or if he'll crack before he finds what he's so desperately hunting for. Hey guys, I'm your host, Juan, and today we'll be talking about 68, Jungle Jim. There was a lot of hype around this one, and I totally understand why. So yeah, our story today was originally published as a standalone Jungle Jim one-shot in 2011, and then it was followed up 2 years later with a 4-issue miniseries that continued the series under the same name. All of it was written by Mark Kidwell, with colors by Fotos. The 2011 one-shot was drawn by Nate Van Dyke, and the 2013 series was done by Jeff Zornow. But before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can stay in the loop with all the latest videos. And if you'd like to support the channel one step further, consider joining the membership program. Early access and bonus content are included. I know some people were worried about the bonus episode stuff, but don't worry, it's mostly going to be stuff that's already been covered a lot on YouTube, so yeah, for the most part. But enough with all that, let's jump right in. Our story opens on March 10th, 1968, west of Da Nang in Vietnam. We see a shrouded figure watching from the tree line a pair of Viet Cong men guarding captured American servicemen. One hangs suspended from a tree, and the others are half submerged in filthy water. The stranger silently observes this, and he prepares to step in. And we see that they have already been busy, as a nearby tree branch is decorated with the severed heads of 4 Viet Cong men who they killed on the way in on the perimeter. And so the mysterious man moves in, wading through the green Vietnamese river. He's certainly unconventional looking. The guy is wearing a U.S. Army uniform with this dark gas mask obscuring his face, and a helmet with the words Jungle Jim scrawled across it. He's absolutely armed to the teeth as well, with a heavy firearm, multiple frag grenades, and a large, razor-sharp blade. But perhaps most disconcerting is the fact that he's also bizarrely constantly narrating what he's doing, excitedly chattering to this sergeant. But the problem is, there's no one there. But regardless of the stranger's mental well-being, he appears to be highly gifted in special reconnaissance because the man moves like a ghost, fast, silent, and lethal. He floats up to the dock, undetected, where he sneaks up on the Viet Cong guard, who's about to drown one of the Americans in a cage. And, well, this Jungle Jim character, he silently slits the enemy's throat. He then helps the American out of his trap, and he orders him to go free his friends. And so Jungle Jim stalks up to the Viet Cong HQ, where he pulls a pin out of a grenade and suddenly kicks down the front door. He takes a peek inside and freezes. The Viet Cong are playing a game of Go Fish with an American, a traitor who betrayed his team in order to curry favor with the enemy. Jungle Jim pauses, glaring at the guy and telling him to go fish in hell. And so he tosses the frag into the center of the room and bails. Outside, he runs into one of the freedmen, who is watching his comrade on the dock, attempting to resuscitate their other friend, who is trapped underwater. The guy is completely out cold and non-responsive, and all hope seems to be lost. Well, that is until he finally sputters to life. Well, life might be a choice word, because, rather, the guy is an undead zombie, and he starts ripping the flesh out of the soldier's neck. But Jungle Jim knows what's up, because the apocalypse began like a month ago at this point, so he definitely snipes the two in the head, which is the only way to stop them from coming back. However, as that happens, simultaneously, Jim's buddy there, he winds up getting JFK'd by a Vietnamese guy who survived the explosion. Our hero quickly shoots the bastard, and then he starts frantically apologizing to the invisible sergeant only he can hear, for being a dumb rookie, and for not making sure there were no more loose ends. So yeah, this operation was kind of a bust, but at least our man manages to find one still yet alive prisoner of war. The poor guy is super dehydrated, as he's been locked in a cage all day in the sweltering jungle, but Jim frees him, and they get on their way. The pair wind up marching over 6 miles eastward to Jungle Jim's secret treehouse base. The other dude is alright at this point, a little shaken up, but he's okay. And so he climbs up the tree, where he runs into this short, older Vietnamese lady, who yells at him in her own language. Jim manages to defuse the situation, explaining that her name is Quy, and that she hates the Viet Cong. And I guess she's like his Alfred or something, because she then makes them some stew. Whatever the case, the two get to talking. Jungle Jim takes off his gas mask finally, revealing himself to be a 19-year-old kid with this wild look in his eyes. Jim asks the serviceman what his name is, and the guy replies that it's Brian Curlis. Apparently, Brian here is actually a Marine, and he and his boys got ambushed and captured by the enemy on a patrol one day. The jarhead then looks up at Jim and asks what his story is. The kid laughs, and he discloses that his real name is actually not Jim. It's Sam Adler, and he shares that he's an army soldier, specialized in counterinsurgency operations. Sam then jabs his thumb back and gestures at the wall, where there's these pictures that show the real Jungle Jim. You see, Jungle Jim was the nickname of one Sergeant James W. Asher. The story goes that Sam voluntarily signed up to join the army without a draft compelling him to do so in order to avoid his problems back at home. And it was Sergeant Asher who took him under his wing. Jungle Jim taught the kid everything he knew, and he showed him the ways of jungle warfare, even going so far out of his way to counsel Sam about his personal affairs. However, this mentorship was not fated to last. 3 weeks ago, Sam, his sergeant, and their platoon were sent on a search and destroy mission deep in the jungle. Immediately, things started going wrong, because they encountered unexpectedly heavy resistance from the VC. Several Americans were killed, and, well, you know what that means. Rising up and surprising them from behind was a pack of ravenous zombies. And despite everything Jungle Jim taught him, when he was actually in the shit, Sam started to break down and panic. The lad began wildly flailing his gun around, and sadly, he ended up shooting his own sergeant down. So, after killing his own father figure and hearing his friends screaming in agony around him as mortar shells pelted the ground, Sam simply ran. Not tactically, not bravely, just ran until his legs gave out, and the jungle swallowed him whole. And there, lost in a foreign land, far away from home. He eventually met Qui, and the rest is history. So, after hearing this tale, Brian, the Marine, tries to comfort Sam and to ease his guilt, but the young buck isn't having it. In his eyes, he not only left Jungle Jim Asher to die, he allowed the man to turn into this cannibal monster that will continue to actively harm any survivors who are out there. And that's why Sam runs around the jungle. Sure, he saves people when he can, but his real mission is to locate the undead man and put him down for good. That's his purpose. That's why he's here. Brian looks at him aghast and asks how he's so sure that a sergeant is even out there. Sam stares back at him blankly with crazed eyes and responds that he knows because his sergeant still talks to him. Oh boy. Yeah. So anyway, Qui tells them both to shh because she sees a line of lanterns moving on the ground closer to them. It's the Viet Cong. Sam hands Brian a weapon and tells him to get ready to kill some motherfuckers if they get too close. And that's exactly what happens. One of the Vietnamese guys spots the magic treehouse up there, and it quickly becomes a war zone. Unfortunately, Qui's head gets exploded in a spray of blood, and Sam lets out a fierce war cry before he too is tragically struck down by a hail of bullets. Brian crawls over to his dying savior, and he's unwilling to abandon him. But Sam, with a jaunty grin across his face, laughs and remarks about how ironic it is that saving the Marine ultimately ended in his death. He tells Brian to escape while he still can, but to make sure to grab a duffel bag by the door on the way out. And so Brian, with a sad look on his face, complies, shooting Sam in the head and blowing up the hideout with a rocket. The Marine darts into the jungle, where he unzips the duffel bag, which is stuffed with maps, and Sam's signature uniform. Brian's face twitches as he stares at the helmet. He reads the words on it over and over again. He mutters out loud that this is all crazy, but, quote, maybe crazy is catching. Right, Sarge? So the one-shot ends with Brian seemingly descending into madness, donning the iconic getup and becoming the new Jungle Jim. So, like I said, that Jungle Jim one-shot was published by Image Comics in 2011. 2 years later, a sequel, 4-issue miniseries would come out, still written by Mark Kidwell, but with art this time by Jeff Zornow. So yeah, let's get into it. The story picks up about 2.5 weeks after the conclusion of the last book, and we see Brian Curlis, the new Jungle Jim, covertly surveying a group of the Viet Cong, who are riding around on an elephant like Hannibal and corralling a shackled group of American prisoners. And as Jungle Jim tells his sergeant, they have just made themselves a target that's too big to miss. So our boy straight up fires a bazooka at the elephant, exploding its goddamn head off in an absolute insane spectacle. Man, Pete is going to be pissed off about this one. Yeah, this new Jungle Jim is somehow even more unhinged than before. He full throttle barrels it at the VC, flying through the air and burying his machete into their shocked faces. Of course, as per usual, he's schizo-narrating everything he's doing to the invisible sergeant that talks to him. He quickly frees the Americans and dumps a pile of the enemy weapons at their feet, eagerly promising them all an epic payback. And so, minutes later, Jungle Jim appears to be standing alone atop of a grassy mound. The Viet Cong see him just standing there, and they yell that they're going to shoot the devil as they rush up at him. But it was a trap. When the Kong get close enough, the Americans pop out of the grass, and they cleanly execute their former tormentors like a firing squad. All that's left is a lone straggler, who paces up to Jungle Jim and dramatically tosses away his firearm before slowly drawing out his machete, essentially challenging him to a sword battle. And Jim takes the bait, and he pulls out his K-bar blade, and the two sprint at each other with determined looks. Our hero blocks the enemy's strike with his new forearm reinforcements, which are made out of thick bamboo sticks. And the Vietnamese guy lets out a high-pitched scream as Jungle Jim slices off his nose. Damn, you usually have to go to Turkey for that. And if that wasn't enough, the costume maniac throws his knife into the guy's Johnson like it's a game of darts. So yeah, this battle was a clear, if brutal, victory. The American servicemen all want to go along with and follow Jungle Jim, but he shuts them down. He tells them to go as far west as they can, in the hopes of finding some sort of transportation out of Vietnam. He says that there's absolutely no salvation to the east, but nevertheless, that's where Jim intends to go, because in his words, he's got shit to do. From there, we transition to a new location near the Laos-Vietnam border. It's a small French mission, a religious outpost set up to spread Christianity to the locals. The mission is home to a group of orphan children who have been living there since the apocalypse began. The community is run by a French woman named Manon, and her number 2 is an old Vietnamese gentleman named Trang. In any event, a heavy storm begins to brew, and Manon prays, thanking God that they have been largely shielded from both the Vietnam War and the rise of the undead. But apparently the Lord has decided to test her, because in the pitch-black darkness, the lightning strikes illuminate a large zombie, slowly staggering its way into camp. As that is happening, Brian, Jungle Jim Curlis, is caught up in the same storm. He doesn't seem to notice, though, as he's too busy throwing up. I guess that's what happens when you're stumbling around in a mask in the dark jungle at night during an intense rainstorm. Nevertheless, Jim apologizes to the Sarge for being weak, but this is interrupted by a growling sound. It's a pack of stray dogs, signaling the arrival of a rotting horde of zombies. Apparently, these animals have been hanging out with the undead in order to get scraps from them. Whatever the case, our hero puts his gas mask back on and he charges into battle. As you can see, outnumbered to hell, with all the odds stacked against him, the guy becomes even more emboldened, and he carves through the undead like a ruthless force of nature. We also get a closer look at the mods Brian made to the Jungle Jim uniform. Not only did he add the light armor with the bamboo, he also wrapped barbed wire around the helmet, making it harder for enemies to grasp onto. He's also reinforced and insulated the inside of his clothes with thick layers of fabric, which make zombie penetration nigh impossible. Anyway, apparently Jim made short work of the monsters, because we cut to an hour later and see our protagonist talking to himself, remarking on just how tired he is. We see him fiddling around with a map and circling and crossing out certain areas of it. And it's here where we finally learn what Jungle Jim's looking for. It turns out that Brian not only inherited Sam Adler's insanity, he assumed his mission as well. He's looking for the original Jungle Jim, Sergeant James W. Asher, and he won't rest until he finds him. And so the twist reveal is that not only is the reanimated sergeant actually still around, he's actually the very same zombie sneaking into the mission, hand stretched out, reaching for the sleeping Manon. She lets out a blood-curdling scream as the corpse's hot breath hits her face. With all her might, she holds the beast back, but she doesn't know how long she can do it for. Luckily, Trang and an armed boy spring onto the scene in the nick of time. The elder hits the zombie across the head with his torch, searing half its face, and the creature appears to make a full-on tactical retreat, which is highly unusual behavior. The kid keeps missing the shots, so Trang snatches the gun away from him, and he frantically fires at the escaping sergeant. Unfortunately, he only manages to shoot its ear off before it disappears into the jungle. Nevertheless, Manon profusely thanks the man for protecting her and the children, but Trang just shakes his head. The zombie, he warns, will remember, and it will return. He then yells at the boy, whose name is Min by the way, sharply ordering him to return to his watch post and to do a better job next time. Trang next hands Manon a bathrobe to cover herself with, because, well, Min is 16 years old and the oldest kid at the outpost, and Trang has noticed the way he looks at her. It's harmless, really, but it's best to firmly shut this kind of thing down ahead of time. Manon thanks him again for everything, and he replies that it's nothing. They're all a family, and families look out for one another. And so the two kneel down and pray as the morning sun rises over them. We cut over to Jungle Jim and see what he's up to. Right now he's on the Laotian border, watching through a pair of binoculars a party of stooped-over Vietnamese people dragging themselves across the unforgiving terrain. Jim notes that they definitely don't look like they're Viet Cong. No. They look like wearied and broken down people, just trying to make it as best they can in these difficult times. So he decides to let them pass without incident. However, fate has different plans for them all. Soaring through the air at hundreds of miles per hour are 2 U.S. Air Force fighter jets. The pilots complain to each other over the comms about having to still do this shit despite the war being over. You see, all the planes still have thousands of pounds of bombs weighing them down, so right now they're pretty much just dumping it wherever their radars detect movement. And in this case, unfortunately, that would happen to be upon the civilians. Everyone starts running for their lives, Jungle Jim included. He sprints as hard as he can, moving much faster than the older civvies, and without breaking pace, he smoothly scoops up a little Vietnamese girl as more bombs explode around them. In mere seconds, the scene is indistinguishable from hell itself, as the ground is instantly ignited in an intense inferno. Jim clutches the girl as everyone around them screams, as the napalm eats the flesh off their bodies. Our hero manages to carry them both to safety, but the child is crying and shaking with fear. Jungle Jim asks what's wrong, but obviously she doesn't speak English. So she stumbles away from him and covers her face. And Jim realizes that she's scared of his mask, so he takes it off and gives her a big smile. And the girl looks at him and sounds out that he looks like he's G.I. Joe. Hey, I'm pretty sure that's like racist, yo. Anyway, the kid lightens up and excitedly repeats the truncated words, American, Hershey-bar, and Coca-Cola over and over again. And her childlike wonder rubs off on Jim, and he laughs and digs around in his pouch because he actually has a Hershey's bar, which he hands off to her. She immediately tears off the wrapper and gobbles up the chocolate, much to the warrior's amusement. And just like that, 30 minutes later, man, they're good friends. The girl rides on Jim's shoulders, now even wearing his scary mask, and he breathlessly recounts to her the whole Jungle Jim origin story, the entire saga, down to the last detail. Jim also starts consciously moderating his language, and even though she can't understand him, he nevertheless apologizes to the little girl for his frequent derogatory language toward Asians. He doesn't hate them all, just the VC, really, and so he realizes he should probably cool it with the slurs. But this learning moment is interrupted by the sudden emergence of over 36 groaning zombies. Jungle Jim got completely distracted, and he let his guard down, and now it may just cost him everything. The two book it as fast as they can, but they are quickly encircled on all sides. So our hero picks up the girl in one hand and starts scrambling up one of the thick Laotian trees. They get far enough away to finally catch their breath. Jim grabs his mask and fits it back over his face for protection. But as he's doing so, the kid starts shrieking. Our man demands to know what she's pointing at. But then he looks, and his blood runs cold. Staring at him from underneath the shadow of some leaves are a pair of terrible yellow eyes. It's a full-grown, angry Indo-Chinese tiger, and it pounces at Jim with full force. Its powerful paws knock him backwards out of the tree, damn near straight into the hands of the undead. Fortunately, it didn't, though, and miraculously, he slams into the ground without breaking any bones. But the big cat lands after him onto the mossy ground, and Jungle Jim's like, well, fuck. So he just shrugs his shoulders and defaults to what's familiar, killing zombies. And to his great astonishment, the large feline is also running around and slicing through the creatures with its sharp claws. Jim shakes his head in disbelief, but he's like, well, the enemy of my enemy, I guess. And so Jungle Jim literally teams up with a goddamn tiger. Anyway, soon enough the strange duo has exterminated all the undead monsters, and there is an almost awkward silence as both of them realize that the only ones left are each other. The tiger meanly snarls, baring its blood-soaked teeth at the man. Jim carefully watches the dangerous animal, and he slowly raises his gun up at it. But I guess this is kind of like a Richard Parker type situation, because the cat just looks at him one last time before it slinks off back into the jungle without incident. Our protagonist helps the little girl out of the tree, and she immediately starts shrilly protesting. She grabs Jim's hand and desperately tries to get him to follow her. From what little Vietnamese he knows, Jim can ascertain that the child is trying to lead him to some kind of mother that must be close by. From there, we jump over to the mission, where Manon is currently teaching an English lesson to the children. But their silent study is abruptly disturbed by a gunshot followed by loud shouts outside the classroom. Manon and Trang rush outside, and what they discover stops them dead in their tracks. It's the militant Viet Cong. Their leader has a knife to Min's neck, and he demands that she hand over 2 young boys for them to take. If she refuses to comply, the villain promises that he'll feed her to this stitched-together zombie monstrosity he has. The scene fades to black. When we return, Manon lies on the ground, bruised and trembling, and the implication of what she's endured is truly devastating. She silently sobs as she pulls her clothes over her body, and she limps outside. She tries to stay strong, but pain breaks through her face, especially when she notices Trang strung up on a post, missing his left hand, and a bunch of smirking Kong about to feed Min to their pet. Manon launches herself at one of the men in a fury, digging her nails into the guy's cheek. The man angrily strikes her across the face with his gun, and he grabs her by the hair and begins dragging her to the zombie. The children cry out as the demon's putrid tongue twists across her skin, eager to get a taste. But just when all hope seems lost, several cries ring out as a massive mob of the undead storms the outpost. The Viet Cong man throws Manon onto the ground, and he joins his comrades in arms. The woman weakly looks up and sees, standing before her, the very same tall zombie from earlier. The same one that's different from the others. Quite different. He appears to be executing rather sophisticated attack tactics, and disturbingly, it even seems like this alpha zombie's giving orders to the others. But Manon doesn't have time to think about that. No. She screams in fear as the living nightmare picks her up and pulls her closer. And sadly, it plants its teeth into her forearm, and it savagely rips out her tissue. But then the entire planet seems to shake as several random frag grenades explode, blowing up the zombies and sending their body parts flying through the air. And simultaneously, what sounds like enough firepower to supply a small army starts going off. It's Jungle Jim, arriving onto the scene with no time to spare. The man is an efficient killing machine at this point. It's like he was made for this. And he splits zombies' skulls open like watermelon. And the big zombie guy notices this, and it escapes once again. Manon, for her part, crawls over to a raging fire, and she cauterizes her wound on it before passing out. An hour or so later, everyone is bandaged up, and introductions are hastily made as they try to figure out what each of them knows. Obviously, most of them are in pretty rough shape, and like I said, Trang is missing an entire hand. Be that as it may, though, the conversation soon touches on the subject of that mysteriously intelligent zombie. Jungle Jim is incredibly interested in the topic, and he about falls out of his seat when Manon shares that it was wearing a US Army uniform. And so now our hero knows that the man he's been hunting across Vietnam and Laos is close. But the conversation is interrupted by Min, who bursts into the room to remind them that the Viet Cong's trail is getting cold. Apparently, most of the Cong escaped amidst the chaos, but not before they kidnapped two of the children in their panicked retreat. Jungle Jim vows that he's going to save the kids, and he's going to bring the enemy to justice. And for the first time since this misery began, Manon's face brightens for the briefest of moments. Trang, for his part, stoically looks around the room, and he asks to speak to the warrior alone. And so we learn the contents of their private talk here, overlaid over a scene of Jungle Jim going outside and getting ready for the mission. The elder somberly informs Jim that he knows that Manon was bit, and both men know what that means. And with Jim leaving and all, Trang needs a way to put down this ticking time bomb. So Jim passes him a small gun that he'll be able to handle in his weakened state. And with that, the two part ways, with Trang promising to do what's right for Manon one last time. Jungle Jim doesn't tell any of this to the woman herself, of course. He just asks if she can watch over the little Vietnamese girl he saved. Manon warmly smiles and agrees, and she finds out that the little girl's name is actually Lee. The mother of this community then looks at Jim inquisitively, and she asks why he continues to wear that mask if it's difficult to see and breathe in. The man pauses for a moment, and then he cautiously answers that something happens when he puts it on. He's not scared anymore, and he feels like he can do anything. When he puts on the mask, he's death on two legs, but without it, well, he doesn't know quite what he is. And with that, Jungle Jim marches off in pursuit of the VC, accompanied by Min. 4 hours later, the two have caught up to the Viet Cong, who have stopped to make camp at the edge of a large valley. They decide to carefully watch their movements and to take turns resting up for the final battle. And that's where we leave them for now. Instead, we zoom in on the lead Viet Cong militant guy, who is confiding to one of his subordinates that something's not right here. He knows that there used to be an entire village in this area, and it's completely disappeared. All he knows is that he's got a bad feeling, and that gut instinct is validated as the issue ends with us finding out just what happened to the village. Presently, they are rising out of the earth, and standing over them in a commanding presence is the fearful stature of Sergeant Jungle Jim Asher. We pick back up at dawn at the mission. Trang hobbles up behind Manon, who is sluggishly digging into the ground with a shovel. He cautiously asks what the mother is doing, and she admits that she's digging her own grave. Manon makes him promise that he'll protect the kids, because, well, he's all they'll have left. She tells Trang that she loves him, and she says that if he loves her too, he will help put her to rest. So Trang raises his gun to the back of Manon's head, and we see just how far she's fallen, as her eyes are now blood red and her skin is gaunt and gray. The elder's hand shakes, and he begins to cry as the woman quietly prays. However, ultimately, Trang bows his head, and he weakly utters that he's just not strong enough. Manon never turns around to look at him. She merely remarks that sometimes the things the Lord asks of us are too great. And with that, she slowly walks into the chicken coop and shuts the door behind her. Elsewhere, Jungle Jim finds himself in a bar, drinking a shot with none other than the sergeant, who looks like a kind of warped Venom. He asks Jim if he's losing his stomach for this shit, and our protagonist starts freaking out. But yeah, this sequence is obviously some kind of twisted, subconscious schizo dream, I guess. And anyway, Jim is shaken awake by Min, and he nearly pins the kid to the ground with his knife before he comes to his senses and calms down. Min chokes for air, and he asks Jim what the fuck is wrong with him, before he too regains his composure. He tells Jungle Jim that an army of the undead has just started attacking the Viet Cong, and as we can see, it's not going great for old Charlie. But in any event, Jim and Min jump into the fray with no qualms. One of the Vietnamese soldiers rapidly taps his leader's shoulder, shouting that he sees the devil himself, and he's pointing at Jungle Jim, who's charging around the battlefield like a maniac. But what works, and the Americans slaughter both zombies and the Viet Cong with ease, and they soon locate the kidnapped children. Jim provides cover for Min as he rushes toward them. The young man's been through a lot in the last 36 hours, and now he's got to do something to make it all worth it. So Min bravely grabs the kids, and he sprints away as bullets whiz by overhead. Jungle Jim continues killing the Kong, but his rampage is stopped when a bullet grazes through his arm. It's that leader guy, with an ugly grin across his face. He tells Jim that the John Wayne act is over, and while he might look like the devil, he's about to prove that even devils can die. But no sooner does he utter those words, a familiar face emerges out of the darkness behind him. It's the sergeant, who satiates his appetite on the Vietnamese man's neck, in a pretty gruesome and bloody display. Jim cannot believe his eyes. After everything that's happened, he now stands face to face with the original Jungle Jim Asher. Our hero pulls out his gun, but most unbelievably, the sergeant gestures to follow him, and Jim does. Jungle Jim sheepishly informs the Walking Dead man that he's here on behalf of Sam Adler. He is here to finish what he couldn't. He peers into the sergeant's eyes, desperately searching in them for some kind of meaning to all this, but all he sees in them is this cold blankness. Nevertheless, to Jim's great shock, the Sarge somehow manages to speak a single coherent word. Now. And just like that, 4 zombies lunge out of the brush. It was a trap. Jungle Jim was tricked into walking into an ambush. But our warrior is not some green stick. No, this is a man who's been to hell and back, and then some. And he's not giving up until he's seen this thing through to the end. And so, Jim quickly puts down his attackers. He immediately whips around and points his weapon at the sergeant once again, bluntly notifying him that it's over and there's not going to be any more games. Sergeant Asher stares at him silently. Then he stiffly raises his arm, pointing at a shallow hole in the ground. It's a grave that the zombie had dug for itself. Jungle Jim nods his head in understanding, and the two salute each other as the morning sun peeks through the jungle. A single shot rings through the air, and the sergeant's body drops into the grave. Jungle Jim kneels down, and he contemplates his dog tags for a moment, and he comes to the realization that he's had enough of all this. He's tired, and he just can't take it anymore. So he unbuckles his helmet, and he leaves it behind on the sergeant's grave. And so, as Brian Curlis walks off into the horizon, he conclusively declares that Jungle Jim is dead. It takes about 4 hours for Min, Brian, and the children to return to the mission, and they are greeted by jubilant cheers by the rest of the kids. But there is one unhappy face among them, Trang, who wears his sorrow on his sleeve. Brian asks if he did it, but Trang shakes his head and tells him that no, he failed her, and that she's still in the coop with the chickens. Brian takes a deep breath, and he pushes open the door. He looks up in pity at Manon, who had tried to hang herself, but that wasn't enough to stop her from coming back. So the Marine tightens his mask back on, and he shoots her down with cold efficiency. But that kind of darkness can take a toll on a man. Such misery, it drowns you. The chronic lack of answers, it makes you question everything, and the futility of redemption wears down your soul. You either break, or you become something beyond. And Brian now finds himself at this fork in the road. He walks back outside and looks at Trang. He tells the man to bury Manon and to teach the children how to shoot. Trang asks if he'll consider staying because, maybe this is where he belongs. But our hero says no. He replies that underneath the mask is where he's supposed to be. And he starts to walk away, but he looks over his shoulder a final time and utters that his name's no longer Brian anymore. It's Jim. And with that, the warrior disappears into the mist. And so the miniseries ends with a scene at midnight on the Vietnamese side of the border. We see a young, presumably Viet Cong, soldier taking a smoke break before he gets preyed on by a familiar figure. It's Jungle Jim, who complains to the voice in his head that he's going to need a new helmet. Except, he's no longer talking to the sergeant. No. Rather, he's chattering to Brian. You see, it's not the sergeant whispering in Brian's ear anymore. No, this is a man who thinks he is Jungle Jim talking to Brian. In other words, he's no longer wearing Jungle Jim. He is Jungle Jim. An ego death, perhaps, or just a new layer of madness. It's difficult to say, my friends, but perhaps that's a story for another time. Because, as for now, thus so concludes the insane tale of Jungle Jim.
Kowalski, analysis.
So, that was 68 Jungle Jim. What did you guys think of it? Feel free to share your thoughts and reactions in the comment section down below. Also make sure to like and subscribe if you want me to continue this series. If you did like the Jungle Jim story, you will be pleased to hear that he definitely returns. He gets woven into the broader main 68 storyline. And he becomes a big player there, so that's pretty cool. Hopefully the next video doesn't take as long to come out. Sorry, it happens sometimes. I always come back and follow through, though. I just stumble sometimes along the way. But yeah, that's enough. Let's do some analysis, starting with looking at what the creators said about their own work. So, in a 2013 interview with Daily Dead, the interviewer asks writer Mark Kidwell and colorist Jay Fotos how the character of Jungle Jim came to be, and Kidwell responds that Jim was born kind of by accident. Jay had contacted comic artist and illustrator Nate Van Dyke about possibly doing a one-shot for the 68 line. Nate was interested, but tired of doing continual pages that required him to draw buildings, cars, etc. Jay called me and asked if I could come up with a script that mostly focused on a limited number of characters and used mainly jungle as a backdrop. Using that tall order as a jump-off point, I sat down and 3 days later sent Jay the script for the first Jungle Jim book. The character evolved a bit from my original script. My original design for Jim didn't have the gas mask. He was armored up with heavy burlap and gloves, but swathed his face in burlap strips as, well, like a mummy, with thick goggles to cover his eyes. Jay and Nate jammed on some character designs, adding the gas mask and the bamboo gauntlets, and transformed the image I'd created into something more. It went from, hey, that's freaking cool, to, holy shit, that kicks ass. It takes a village to properly nurture and raise a killing machine. That's interesting. It sounds like the concept of Jungle Jim evolved and developed over time into the rambunctious character we saw in the book. It's also fascinating that he was essentially a byproduct of external constraints. You know, tell a story in a single jungle setting, and what do you get? Well, Jungle Jim. Anyway, the interviewer next asked Kidwell to talk about the idea of this Jungle Jim persona and, the subsequent madness, passing from person to person. And the writer elaborates that you'll definitely see a continuation of the JJ madness established with the passing of the gas mask in the one-shot. Part of what makes the character so fascinating is the effect donning that grim headgear has on our main character. With Brian Curlis, the mask tends to shut down a lot of his own self-doubt and allows him to tap into a more experienced, primal killer instinct. He's a different person with the mask off. You'll see some interesting metamorphoses during the story and witness the physical and mental toll that strapping on the JJ gear and accepting the character's strange mission can have on a person. Yeah, the whole identity thing was probably the most intriguing aspect of the story, and it has a lot of potential implications to it. It's actually a concept I've thought a lot about, surprisingly. That being the idea of becoming someone else through the sheer force of will, or alternatively, they're not really being a true self there at all. Just instead some sort of blankness that puts on masks and, well, let's just say that there are instances where the mask becomes the man. If I ever do get around to starting my third channel up, this is the kind of stuff I'll talk about there in more detail. But for now, I'll refocus. I'm sorry. Anyway, the idea of a kind of person like Jungle Jim definitely has some real-world precedent, which is to say that there are certainly military myths about legendary snipers or pilots that often blur the line between fact and fiction, and sometimes even take a supernatural aura as well. And that kind of thing can have an effect on the mind. It shapes one conception of the limits of possibility, and in some cases, you make sense of what you're doing through and in regard to these larger-than-life frameworks. But not just the military. Not at all, no. All around us are these mythic archetypes. Captain America is an archetype. Clint Eastwood's cowboys are an archetype. They are pure distillations of certain ideas or eras, and we can use them to bridge to these underlying abstractions that they give form to. So in other words, when you step into the boxing ring, you may become Rocky, at least consciously or subconsciously. You might understand yourself through that myth. But it's just something to think about, okay? I could go into a lot more detail, but I think we can leave it there for now. So that about does it for today's video. If you enjoyed, please share your own theories in the comments. Or, by all means, conduct your own analysis on any aspect of the story I didn't touch on. I love reading those, okay? But, I suppose until next time, I will thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good one.